We're good, sir.
Okay, so let's get started. And Randy, do you have some comments that you want to open with?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Purpose of this evening's session, Christie, can you help me? Is to discuss a draft SOP, and it's put together by myself and the folks in the city manager's office. And its purpose is to help provide a bit of a more formal structure to the council's appointment process. It was designed to be a work from which to add, delete, deviate, improve. So it's a straw man for discussion. But in putting it together, my goal was to capture the kinds of things that council members have talked to me individually about, to re-present some old practices that this city has used in the past in this regard, and also in a couple of cases to bring practices that we used in other localities I've served over the course of my career. So if that's okay, I would propose that we sort of walk through it paragraph by paragraph, and stopping for questions, suggestions, revisions, and additions as we go.
Okay, sounds good. I know Keith has some things he wants to say after you do yours, and David.
And four. Okay. Again, our hope is, following this discussion or at the conclusion of council's discussions on this matter, that we would then formalize this into something that really looks like an SOP and bring it back for your formal consideration and approval. But some of this is for the public's benefit. Just a reminder that the council makes several different kinds of appointments. The first bullet is the types of things that you make all of the appointments to, like the school board, the planning commission, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, things like that. Then there are multi-jurisdictional boards that you make an appointment or two to. Sometimes they're ex officio and sometimes they're not. An example of ex officio is the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, in which the mayor and the city manager serve by dint of office. One that's regional that is not ex officio is the VIPSA board, in which John Anderson, Modena Wright, and Tom Jones before that has represented us.
Randy,
Yes, sir.
I hate to interrupt you, but your mic is not on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Keeps coming off, it keeps going back and forth.
It sounds like it's on.
Picky.
All right. Do we have audio? Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then the last is times where this council makes a recommendation to another body that makes the appointment. An example of that is the Board of Equalization. That's actually made by the courts. So you have different kinds of appointments that you make. And this is, generally speaking, the process that we have now. And following this slide, we'll move into the suggested elements of an SOP. Right now, generally speaking, this is our process, and it's very informal. The clerk notifies council of upcoming appointments and resignations. The clerk receives board bank applications, disseminates them to your electronic board bank site, and also makes hard copies upon request for members of council. The the clerk manages the formal role for full school board appointments. That process is prescribed by the Code of Virginia for communities that have appointed school boards. Fourth bullet, so the council members being aware of upcoming appointments and having access to the board bank applications, review applications, in some cases contact applicants, and then come here and make nominations for council consideration. Sometimes council members also make a request or suggestion to the mayor that interviews be held. Right now, the only time we definitely hold interviews has been for full school board appointments, but we've also at times held them for planning commission, architectural review board, and in some instances, school board reappointment, depending upon how many things are in play at one time. So this is the way it works now, and I believe that most council members are interested in having a bit more a formal process. So beginning with the next slide, you'll see this. It's written in affirmative language, but keep in mind from this moment forward, everything here is drafted and suggested. So when we say we do this, that's just putting the idea into an active word choice. So again, right now, the only interviews the city council does always is for full school board members. And what I'm suggesting here for your consideration is that we establish an SOP that says all full school board position terms and planning commissions would be interviewed all the time as a standard practice. And then council would have the discretion, as always, to decide whether or not to do interviews for partial term, unexpired terms for both planning commission, council, and planning commission, as well as the option which you've always had as a council, which is to have interviews for any other position at any time upon suggestion and consensus by the body. So I'll stop there, unless you would like me to run it all the way through.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
All right, I'll run it all the way through, and then we can come back if it's helpful. This is a practice that has been common in other places that I've been, and also was a pretty common way that city council dealt with this early on in my tenure here. Not as much lately, but it's suggested here that in times where there are appointments that are not subject to that prescribed, required appointment process, that if it is a district-level appointment, that the two council members that represent that district would put their heads together, review the board bank applications, potentially speak with the persons putting their names forward, and come up with, when possible, a joint recommendation to fill a slot. That is very common how things were done when I was in Folk here, and also Spotsylvania, but I would note to you that each one, in both of those cases, the district only had one representative, so it wasn't an overlapping representative. And as a reminder, should you choose this, while council is suggested would give great weight to the recommendation, that wouldn't mean that the rest of council would be bound to follow the recommendation. So it's just giving the council members from the precincts the first shot at reviewing and making recommendations. The next thing here really just talks to the fact that, and this isn't done very often in my experience, but it certainly could be, that in considering an application, that individual council members, should they wish to talk to or even meet with, applicants have the ability to do so. In addition, council members that might think it would be best to interview specific folks should, or could in this case, provide to the mayor a suggestion to do that at least 2 weeks ahead of time. So with the clerk providing a longer-term calendar, which is implicit earlier on, council members should know when the anticipated actions will be, so we can back up from there. The reason for the at least 2 weeks' notice is so we can properly schedule it. And once a council agenda has been published on a Thursday for a upcoming Monday meeting, it's really hard for us to change at that point, and difficult also to ensure that we can coordinate with the applicants. We're suggesting that we build a little bit more of a schedule, and we try to stay with it to create an opportunity for the interviews if requested. This is just a reminder, you all know this, but for terms of the SOP, that any member of council may make a nomination for appointment. It doesn't have to be the mayor, the vice mayor, any specific council member. Anyone can do it, and everyone should be encouraged to do it, particularly if you adopt the idea that for district appointments, the district council members have that first ability to screen and make recommendation. It would be appropriate in cases like that for one of those two district representatives to actually make the motion, but not required. Here's a change, a bit of a change. Right now, board bank applications are good for 5 years from the time of submittal. Excuse me. We've suggested we shorten that to 4. When I first got here, board bank applications were literally, they never expired. So we had people that had perhaps put one in 12 years previously, and it just, it's a way to keep it more up to date. So a 4-year rather than 5, for how long it would stay active. And then a different step here that we don't do now, but we could with council's consent, is to look to the city clerk once a year to contact all of the people that have a board bank application to see if they still have an interest, if their interests are still the same. Someone that may have an interest this year in the Parks Board may be very interested in Planning Commission next year. So updating that as well as updating their personal information. We find occasionally that folks put in a board bank application and then they move and they haven't updated the application. Council relies on that application, which shows the wrong district. So at least once a year, the suggestion is that the clerk contact each person and make sure their application is up to date and we are properly reflecting their interest. We have folks, for example, sometimes who something happens in their life and they're no longer interested. And we could at that time make it inactive or remove it entirely upon their request. This is a suggested modified board bank application. It's not long, but we've suggested some changes to it, and really in doing this, what we try to do is mirror many of the questions and comments that we've heard from council members over my time here during the appointment process. So I know it's hard to read. I know it's hard to read for the people at home. So if you'll forgive me, council members, I'll read it out loud since I know the people watching at home can't read it. It starts off with name and date, home address, email address, how long they've been a resident of the city, are they a registered voter, and if so, which precinct are they registered in? In the next 7, list of the board or committees you're interested in serving. Why are you interested in serving on this particular commission? If you're invited to, you're also invited to include a letter of interest, a cover letter, or a resume. What specific education, experience, and other experiences do they have that they feel make them a good fit for that board? A question that speaks to, have you ever had business before that board before? And if so, let us know how that experience was and what it was. If you are appointed, what lessons, or I think it says lessons. Now I'm having a hard time reading it. Issues, sorry. Or areas would you plan to focus on during your term? Are you now, or have you ever served on another board in Poquoson? And if so, just let us know what that is. And then the last question is, are you now, or have you ever been active in any of our civic groups? And just so that we understand, or that you understand, their level of community involvement that they may bring to their application and their candidacy. It's not a long form. We've heard in the past that council didn't want to make it onerous, but I believe what we've tried to do is capture some of the basic questions that council members have asked in the sessions that we've sat in. So in instances where you're trying to study up on applicants, that it gives you a good feel for their qualifications and interest. And then a couple of other items. As council is aware, in most instances, we don't have term limits. The city code does speak to school board members not being able, or limited to being reappointed twice, although by general practice, school board members typically serve no more than a 2-year term. But in most other instances, unless prescribed by code, there are no time limits. So having sat through numerous council deliberations, the suggestion here is, rather than to have a hard and fast rule, have something that is instructive of the council's thought, which would be that no person should expect to serve more than 3 terms. You can obviously change that. But right now, with the exception of school board, there are no term limits. Here's one that is really borrowed from my experience in Spotsylvania, which is to convey a council's expectation, if a person is appointed, that that person will be a regular participant in the meetings. And regular participant here is defined as 75% of the regularly scheduled meetings, so, a special meeting or something that might come up in an emergency, that doesn't really count. Work sessions don't count, but the regular meetings do for this particular set of language. And what it says is, if a person is unable to make 75%, the council, if it wishes to, on that case-by-case basis, can determine that that person is basically resigned their position by virtue of lack of attendance. Now, it gives you, the council, the discretion, so if somebody's had a personal health emergency or other things, you certainly can take that into account. But if it's simply because their job has changed and they no longer can allocate the time, or there's some other commitment, it's a way of excusing them so that we don't have to hold a slot open for a couple of more years potentially, when there are others in the community that would also like to serve that maybe have more availability. And this is one that the council members have talked to at different times over my time here. And again, just like everything else, it's an SOP draft item which you can keep, modify, or scrap as you think best, but is to state the council's expectation rather than a hard and fast rule, but an expectation that the chairmanship be rotated amongst the members of the board or commission such that no member would serve for more than 2 consecutive terms whenever possible. The idea, sometimes people stick in there for quite a while, and it may be good for the benefit of the group to routinely rotate the chairmanship. Thanks, Keith. And I think this is the last one. Yeah, it is. What this is, right now we list our vacancies and things, but we don't do a full court public outreach press. So this idea is that we would, if you adopt this language in the proposed SOP, that the clerk will use additional ways beyond those she already uses to make the public affirmatively aware of vacancies as they come up. This is particularly, it's just good for public outreach. And 2, if we're going to build a calendar, being able to link that up with some public outreach, I think will help us do a good job in soliciting applicants and also sort of formalizing the process. So that is the quick elements of the SOP. I have talked at length, and he'll speak for himself, with Councilman Hux first with regard to both the attendance requirement and also perhaps a new bullet that might be included that speaks to a duty to vote, a duty to attend, and a duty to vote on all matters that, unless the person is lawfully prohibited from voting. I hope I'm not misrepresenting your thoughts.
Spot on, Mr. Manager.
And I spoke with Councilman Fye a couple of times, most recently today. He has got some suggestions which he will trot out, but they essentially come in 3 kinds as I saw them. Some thoughts about additional groups to be interviewed as a matter of course, some suggested additions to the SOP itself, and then he also prepared for your consideration a template that the council could use when doing interviews. So I hope I captured that well.
Yes, you did.
Not attempting to speak for you, sir.
No, you did good.
And that's all I have.
Okay, David, you want to
Thank you, Mr.
ask
Mayor.
some concerns?
Randy and staff, thank you very much for your efforts, much appreciated. I think this is a great benchmark that we can build on. Just a couple questions and comments that I do have for the public advertisement outreach. That's something that could also be advertised on our new electronic sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have that as a note also.
Thank you. Just to embellish just a little bit about the expectation to vote unless there is a legal conflict? Would it be unreasonable for the person to state what that conflict is?
You have a conflict, you can certainly voice it. There's no law that says you have to, no law says you don't have to.
It's just a thought. I didn't know if there were any legalities, the expectation of the person expressing what their conflict is. That's just a thought. Question that I have is, why do we have, say, 9 members on the Parks and Recreation and 7 on the school board and council and other numbers on various boards and commissions? That's just me thinking out loud. I wonder if that could be streamlined. Once we get this in place, is this something that we can communicate to sitting members of boards and commissions?
The answer to your second question is absolutely. And once the city council formally adopts its SOP, not only we will give a copy of it to each person we appoint, but we will make sure to give a copy to each person that is serving. And with regard to the other, in most instances, the numbers of a board, like an advisory board particularly, are a matter at best of the bylaws of the board itself, but the council approves its bylaws. And while the city council billets are set, and a few others like school board, some are not. So if council is interested in sort of streamlining the number of billets on each, well, we can take a look at that. We haven't done that yet, but we certainly could.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Mayor.
Keith, you
Yes.
done some research?
I'll try to be quick. I spent time, and one of the questions you brought up, I wasn't sure, because this is just like for an appointment process as versus the actual works of the boards. So I didn't know how much we could get into asking the boards to do certain things, such as the vote, tell why you voted the way you did type thing for absentee ballots. Anyway, what I had done was I went through, starting with the online list that we had of the boards, and then the ones that you had passed out, and then the ones that Christy gave me when I first came on the board, which was pretty long. And the ones I had, I'll try and go real quick. Architectural Review Board, Board of Zoning Appeals, Economic Development Authority, Parks and Rec, Planning Commission, School Board, and the Wetlands Board. Those are actually mentioned in the city code, that the city council will appoint those. So I kind of put them as the top 7. There's also, among those, because we talked about those are divided by precinct, only 3 have anything where they're divided representation by precinct. And those are the school board, which is in the city code, the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, which is in their bylaws, and the Library Advisory Board, which is also in their bylaws. There may be more bylaws out there I'm not aware of. I was trying to collect the ones I could to get this information. So, but my feeling was those top 7 should have special interest to us because they're in the city code. And maybe we should interview all those. But as David pointed out, there are 7, 7, 7, 9, 7. That's a lot of interviews for not much gain, I don't think. But my thought is perhaps, as a minimum, the council should interview board and commission applicants where the board member either receives a monetary stipend, which is a school board, or where the member must complete a financial disclosure statement or statement of economic interest. And that applies to the school board, the planning commission, and the economic development authority. They all have to do that just like we do. And because of that, I think that maybe we owe them or require of them an interview with the process. And also, I thought we should also include a process step for reappointments. I don't think that appointments should be automatic, especially in the case of whether if the incumbent seeks reappointment and there's 2 or more other citizens that apply for that position, I think an interview would be appropriate. One of those 3 being the incumbent, but with 2 others. Say we have 5 others, they could be whittled down to 2. Don't make like a challenge, but basically the incumbent plus 2 other people, because we owe it. If there's a lot of kind of lifeblood, I think, which I explained in one of my questions, of the city is to have the participation by other members, to have people serving on boards for 20-plus years, as there are. It kind of keeps someone back home that may be watching this going, yeah, I applied and I never heard anything from them, even though I applied 3 times, over a period of 8 years. Give them a chance to get their thing. Nothing against the person that's willing to put in time for 20 years, but maybe they need to be politely tapped on the shoulder and asked to move to one side so someone else can come work. We should not have to interview all the applicants, but for those kind of things where we do have several applicants, perhaps a screening process by someone on the council, and I would be willing to do that, to get us down to a 3, so that the interview process wouldn't be like the 14 I think you had last summer before I came on, which takes all day. If we can get down to just 3 members, maybe 4, depends on how the individual doing that or the individuals would do that, might help out. And then I had questions, if there's an opening, but there's just one applicant, must we choose that individual? I don't know the answer to that, so that's open. It doesn't really cover it there. Applicants should be told, I think, during the interview that the meeting attendance is a requirement, which we just talked about, that reappointments are not automatic, and that participation, such as holding a board leadership position, is highly encouraged. I say that as part of this process, but that would only come out in the interview questions. And for those we don't interview, that would be something that the individual that would talk to the individual would put across to the individual, or the applicants that are seeking application for the position. And also on the new, I really like the new board bank application. The questions I had come up with for that template, try to mirror that, which is really good. And I did the same thing you did. Ones I had heard before, had written down, I tried to incorporate in there. But on the new board bank application, I think that how long an applicant has been a resident of the city, and if they are a registered voter, would not necessarily disqualify them to serve on the board. As I mentioned to you, Randy, when I moved here in '94, being an Air Force guy, I fully intended that after a 3 or 4 year tour, I was going to probably move away, and here I am 27 years later. I don't think that person should be slighted because he, in my case, just happened to have been an Illinois resident, and yet I lived here. I didn't vote here, but my wife did because that was the law at the time. And but that doesn't mean I couldn't contribute in some way to one of the boards or commissions for a few years while I was here. Those are my inputs, and like I said, you have a picture of the template, which I wasn't really going to go over, but you could have to read and make a comment on. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Keith. Jenna?
That was one of my questions, actually. It says, are you a registered voter? If yes, which precinct? Well, if their answer is no, then that means they don't answer the next question. But we would still want to know what precinct they were in.
Right. And whether or not you keep either one of those questions, know that Kim goes through a process of determining what precinct they live in. We've had more than one occasion where the person represented they lived in one precinct, but they were unintentionally incorrect. So we do verify that on our own. So whether you struck that or not, we would do that.
I like the idea of contacting everybody once a year. I think it would be also great if we could contact them when their board bank application was expiring, because as I get older, time flies, and I think it's only been a year, and it's been 3. And so, somebody may forget that it's, they may still want to serve, but have forgotten that it was 4 years since they put it in, and they want to say, oh, yeah, okay, I'll fill it out again and resubmit with my new information. Agree with David on the sign, love the public outreach. I think that's great, because I think we've got a great community with some really great people who may not realize there's an opening because they don't have time to keep track of that. Much like everything that's in there, I really like the idea of interviews for planning commission and school board. I think those are 2 really important boards. I think 2 really important decisions for our city. And, maybe when we were talking about not having to interview 14, and narrowing it down, we could use council members to narrow that down. Like, Buddy and I could, if there's 5 applying from Eastern, maybe we could do interviews to say, okay, we're going to send our top 2 forward.
think that's pretty much what you said.
Yes,
Well, one of the-
that is how,
one of
what I
the
said
options.
could work, let's say
Right.
it that way.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that.
One of the things I think is also really important is, kind of going to what Keith said, is I think anybody that puts in a board bank application and there's an open position for something they said they wanted to do, or a reappointment, you know, after somebody has served there 2 years, is that that person deserves to be spoken to, whether it's an interview with the school board or by the 2 council members. Just because we have experienced looking at a resume and saying, oh, yep, I think that's the person I would pick. And then we interview them, and we're like, we interview everybody, and we've had this happen since I've been here, and we're like, oh, wow, no, I really think this person would, based on what we heard them say, based on experience, things they told us that you can't write on a resume, like, we think they would actually be a better fit. So I think it's important that, you know, that each of those people be called and talked to. You know, and then, you know, because they do put in the time to put that application in, and then no time goes by and they don't hear anything, and they don't know what's happening, so. And what was one of the things you said, David, about, the voting thing, having to vote or not vote? Like, we can't, you were asking, like, could we require them to say why they abstained?
Yes, yes.
Can we, is that, like, could we make a requirement that they do that, or can we not make, like, does that get into legalities if we say you have to tell us why?
You're appointed people. You can set the rules that you want them to follow.
But again, with,
Question is, what happens if they don't follow the rule? How you gonna enforce it? These are all esoteric kind of questions. I mean, it's one thing to say it's expected that you will vote and participate, and when you're unable to participate, you will offer a reasonable explanation for your inability to participate. But there's no way to enforce it. I mean, are you gonna watch every meeting and somebody's going to, you know, tally up, oh, well, Joe didn't say why he didn't vote? I mean, it's one of those things that can just get totally out of hand, and you enforce it on one person and not on somebody else. I mean, I'm not saying anything wrong with it, I'm just saying, you're now creating, if it's in the form of a rule, then it's different than if you say it's expected by council that you will participate and vote and explain your inability to participate. That's one thing, if it's an expectation.
Right, so it sounds like it would be better to be an expectation than a
That's how it's written in this draft.
requirement.
and that's why I was asking the question, because this is for the appointment process and not for how they run their boards, commissions. We can ask the question, like during the interview or the informal interview phone call process, and tell them, hey, we expect you to do this, 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 and this. But we would have to talk to the boards or make known to the boards that that's what we're asking the candidates to do, and we'd like to see you follow through with that. Because right now, it's not an SOP for how boards operate and function. It's an SOP for how we select individuals to go on those boards.
Is there I know there's legal reasons that you have to abstain. If there's no legal reason for you to abstain, are you required to vote by law or no? Or does it depend on the board, or there's Robert's
You're
rules?
talking about people in general, you're talking about city council. City council is required to vote, and you are to voice if you abstain, you're really supposed to say why you abstain, what the basis is. And as an example, one of the practices here is if you don't come to a meeting, you abstain from voting on the minutes. That's not a legal reason to abstain from a vote.
I know, I just found that out. I was just following what everybody else did.
I understand, and it's something that we've done for years and years, but it doesn't mean that it's, again, it's part of your obligation under the city charter. That's a little different situation than many of these people that we're talking about who they're not voted, they didn't stand for election, they're not governed by laws that you are as councilman.
So they don't have that requirement. That's what I was just
They don't have that
clarifying. They
requirement
don't.
unless you're going to either make it as form of a suggestion or a requirement.
Well, in several of the bylaws, that does say that they will follow Robert's rules, as do we. And Robert's rules basically only gives one excuse for abstaining from a vote, and that's if you have a conflict of interest that would
Conflict of
put you in a financial well-being that no one else would. If they don't do that, then they're kind of going against the bylaws, as would we be. We did that. Now, that's not a legal thing,
So
but
we're
we
gonna have
wrote
a
it.
parliamentarian to sit there and instruct them in the course of the meeting that they have to conduct themselves in a particular way, or you leave it up to the chairman? I mean,
Yes.
you are, I understand your desire. You're opening a can of worms as far as how you're going to implement all of this, that's all.
I suggest, the way it was written, the attendance requirement anyway, is as an expectation. Ultimately, if the Parks Board has a bylaw, it's up to the Parks Board chairman, and then the parliamentarian, and then the board itself to see that its bylaws are enforced. The city council does not have independent authority, correct me, to enforce the bylaws. So I think we will be further along if we create in our document, which is a bit of a hodgepodge between appointments and our council's expectations. But I particularly think that, particularly what I call first-day expectations, if we can convey them as our expectation, we're further ahead than we've been. And if we have persons that either are not meeting the attendance requirement and potentially not there ready to vote, except in legal ways, you've got ways to deal with it if you want. You could even, because you have the ability in most of these instances, Mr. Moore will correct me if I'm wrong, if you can remove them for non-attendance, you can also remove them for any other legitimate reason. So if you wanted to add stronger language that would be applicable to those boards and commissions for which you could make a reverse appointment, you could add that language similar to the 75%. Before we did that, obviously, we would seek Wayne's counsel to make sure we were clear legally to do it. But in most cases,
That's why, again, this is a SOP for the appointment, but we can state it like in the interviews or the communications with them. This is, like you said, the expectation is this.
And I think that, you know, we need to avoid getting too detailed in that, because what we do is open up a can of worms. It's not like we're overflowing with applicants in any case, okay? And so people start getting kicked off the boards, okay? Next thing you know, we have boards with not enough members, okay, and no applicants to fill them, okay? And so we need to be careful doing detail, okay? And as far as giving reasons as to why they abstain from a vote, I mean, that should be a very, if they give such an explanation, I agree with Randy, I think it should be suggested, not required, okay? That if they should, it should be a broad explanation should be accepted, such as if somebody says, I abstain because I have a personal problem with this appointment or with this bill or whatever we're discussing, I think a personal issue with it is satisfactory. I'm not going to vote for that person because I know they get drunk every Saturday night, okay? Then you wind up getting in trouble and causing personal issues, okay? And so it has to be a very broad explanation accepted on that, so be careful in detail.
I think we would pretty much all agree that we really don't want a lot of people on the boards that are, I really don't feel like voting for that.
yeah.
I mean, we didn't put you on the board to, I didn't want to vote.
I agree with the meat of that, okay, I do. I just need to want to be careful not to
Right.
put too much detail.
Yep.
I also have two comments, and both of them are very, very small. One of them is extremely small, okay, and that has to do with the application process, where it says list of board or commission you are interested in serving. And my comment is extremely small. I would say board, parentheses, S, parentheses, and commission, parentheses, S, commission, okay? Because a person may think they could only apply for one or the other one, okay? So let them list all the boards and/or commissions that they're interested in, okay? And the other one is, I like Randy's comment about the clerk going through all the applications annually to see if the people are still interested and so forth. But should anyone change their application, whether they want to serve on more boards or less boards, okay? in those cases, I would like for the council to be advised of those changes so that we know that, hey, we have a person that would qualify for 5 boards instead of 1 board. Well, somebody's interested in this commission this time, but not the next time, because like many of you probably, I run my own Excel program, and I list the people on there and in what order they prefer to work, serve on what board. So when it comes up, and I go through and I say, all right, what people do we have in their board list that's interested in serving on this particular board? Okay? I know which ones have that as their first choice, their second choice, third, fourth choice, or so forth, okay? And so if there's changes, I'd like to know about that.
Buddy?
You know, to get back to voting on the minutes, I was a parliamentarian, and I had to read Robert's Rules of Order. Took me several weeks, I kept falling asleep. But it's my understanding that when you vote on the minutes, you're not voting that you attended that meeting. You're voting on the written word of the recordation of that meeting, and as long as you don't see mistakes in that, you are required to vote to either approve or disapprove the minutes. So it doesn't matter that you didn't go to the other meeting. You're only voting on the written word.
I just found that out. I
Yeah.
was just following Bud.
The other thing is,
I've been here for 20 years, and that's the way it's been done, it's been handled that way for the 20 years that I've been.
Nobody told me otherwise.
the other thing is under chair rotation. Randy, I think I heard you say 2 consecutive terms, but the written word is years?
That's what I
Which do we
actually
mean,
meant.
years?
I meant years.
Okay, gotcha.
If I didn't use that word, it needs to be corrected.
Okay, so, based on the comments of council, can you then, I know you want to go back and ask something?
Absolutely.
There were some good points, there were some good points. So if you can do that for us, and then,
I will.
I mean, I don't think we have to have it at our next meeting. I think it would take some time to put it together. We're here at budget time. Somebody mentioned something about attendance, and bi-monthly, I'm talking with the planning commission and with the school board chairs. Kim provides me with a list of meetings that they may have missed, or a percentage that they have missed. I don't think it's my place to, based on, you know, what they tell me, to talk to those people individually. So it's kind of been the school board chairman and the planning commission chairman. They need to have that conversation with their board members. And so we're already doing that. Today, we had, I had one phone call. Kim had an email earlier in the day, and I haven't had a chance to call that lady back. But the first one, her husband did have an application in, and she was concerned, you know, why he wasn't interviewed. Well, he wasn't interviewed because we had already interviewed for school board, and we'd already made a selection. So he didn't, you know, he came in February the 9th, I think it was. We did this probably the month before that. I'm not sure exactly what the date was, but we had done the interviews. So what I told her, you know, on behalf of council, just to leave the application where it is. We don't throw them away. And when there's an opening, I think it was in the western precinct.
We do, he's in the western precinct.
In the western precinct. So, when a position comes open, then interview that person, either under, Randy's given to us with changes that David and Keith and Jana and Bud and Buddy.
We got it.
So I think that's where we are for right now, and we'll see what comes. Let me just mention this about the email. I know what the email said, but I haven't been able to talk to the lady. I think she was concerned that the staff wasn't doing the job correctly. That couldn't be further from the truth. They did exactly, in terms of advertising, they did exactly what they're supposed to do and exactly what they've been doing. And I'll discuss that with her tomorrow, so that we know right where we are. But to accuse staff of not doing their job is, I don't know, it gets next to me, because I know how professional each one of them is and how hard they work to make these things work. So you'll be back to us sometime, maybe April? Okay? The plan-
We'll take another shot at the draft as a team to incorporate the things we've heard today, as well as that kind of first day expectation list, which is a little bit outside the SOP, but I think they can travel together as part of the same thing. And then we will route it informally to council to make sure that we haven't missed anything important. And then once we get that, we'll bring it back for formal consideration and vote.
Okay, that good with everybody?
Yep, I'd like one more comment, okay? First off, we've talked about doing this a few times before, and I think Randy taking the bull by the horns and making a project out of it and doing this, because I think a formal process for some of these boards is a really good thing to do. The other thing is to follow up just a little bit about something you just said, Gordon, with Randy, when we, and to the people who didn't get interviewed, or when we had already had the interviews and made a selection. But if we decide that we're going to interview for any particular board, school, board, planning commission, or whatever, because a person has been interviewed once in the past doesn't mean they shouldn't be interviewed the next time a position comes up, because my memory's about as long as I am, and if I stand up, you can see. Okay? But, and so, in cases where we select a person for one of those boards just because we've interviewed those people before in the past, I would like to interview all the candidates being considered for that board at that time.
Okay,
One thing
sir.
for Randy, when we talked about the one with those that are appointed by precinct, like I said, there's only one in the city code, and that's a school board, but the other two are by bylaws. There might be other committees or commissions out there that, or boards that also have a thing in their bylaws. Is there a way to kind of track that down? And do we need to even care about that, those three, or those other two?
Two questions. Let me take them in turn. Not all of the committees and commissions have bylaws. Some do, some don't. Parks and Recreation does, Library does, Economic Development Authority does. I think it falls off pretty quick from there.
Right.
I can't tell you whether the school board does or does not. I just don't know. You had asked previously sort of what the origin was of the exact number and things. The honest answer is I don't know. All of these were set well before I got here, but if we want to entertain that separately, looking at the numbers and things, I think that can be outside of the appointment SOP and the first day expectations list. And then the last part is, should you care? I can't, I'm not in a position to counsel what it should care about. But I think that once you have this SOP document and the first day expectations, then I think you can look at it again and say, is there more work to be done? And council thinks there is, then we'll settle up and do whatever we can to help you get it done.
Okay, all right, got another meeting.
go, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, let's go. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and if you will stand, we'll have an invocation and our pledge of allegiance. Heavenly Father, we come to you tonight in the name of your Son, Jesus. We ask that as we represent our city here tonight, that you share with us a portion of your strength, a portion of your wisdom. And we pray that any decisions that we make here tonight will be in the interest of those that we serve. Lord, we would ask you to bless those folks in Ukraine. Just try to comfort them in some way, because they're going through a very difficult time. Lord, in this community, we've lost some folks that have been here for many years, and we want their families to know tonight that we are praying for them and reaching out a hand of support whatever they may need. And we make our prayer in your Son's name. For those of you who are watching by TV, I apologize. We ran over a little in our work session, so we do apologize for the delay. Mr. Freeman is obviously absent tonight. He sends his best wishes. I guess it's his anniversary, and so he's in the right place, taking his wife to eat for sure. That'll probably pay off for him. Okay, audience for visitors, I thought we would have someone. I don't see anybody, so we'll just move on past that and go to the approval of minutes of regular session February 28, 2022.
Mayor, I move that we approve the regular session of February 28, 2022.
All right,
Second.
motion made second, we adopt those minutes. Any concerns, comments? Any questions? If not, Ms. Kim?
Councilwoman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Fye?
Aye.
Councilman Southall?
Aye.
Councilman Hucks?
Aye.
Councilman Green?
Aye.
Mayor Hessel?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
All right, thank you, Kim. Moving to new business, first item, additional designation of funding and capital projects funds. Ms. Lee?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good, good. Good evening, Mayor, council, staff. I come before you this evening with a budget request for an appropriation. At the September 27th, 2021 City Council meeting, the city manager brought forth a recommendation to utilize available cash under the debt service fund to fund 9 projects for your consideration. One of these 9 projects approved under ordinance number 1695 was for a replacement of a medic unit for a total appropriation of $115,000. The fire department, at your direction, has applied for a 50-50 grant to replace Medic 11. Due to the inflation of materials since that time, it has now been estimated that an additional $60,000 in local match funding will be required if the city is approved for the grant. The additional funding required has been identified in the Capital Project Fund through completed projects with leftover funds that have been transferred to our undesignated projects in the Capital Project Fund. For this reason, I respectfully request council consider a motion to appropriate the $60,000 from undesignated projects for the replacement of a medic unit in the Capital Project Fund.
Okay, well done. Any questions of Lee? Thank you, ma'am. All right, we have an ordinance attached.
Mayor, I move that we adopt an ordinance appropriating undesignated capital projects to designated projects with the capital project fund of the city of Poquoson, Virginia for fiscal year 2022 as outlined.
Okay.
Second.
Motion made second, we adopt the ordinance. Any concerns, comments, any questions? If not, Ms. Kim?
Councilman Fye,
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews, Councilman Green,
Aye.
Councilman Southall,
Aye.
Councilman Hucks,
Aye.
Mayor Hessel.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Second item under new business is a
Thank you.
resolution making appointment to the school board.
Mayor, I move that we adopt a resolution making an appointment to the school board with the following name inserted: Shannon Martin, for the at-large position, whose term will expire June 30th, 2024.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion made second that we adopt the resolution with Shannon Martin's name inserted. Concerns, comments, or questions regarding that? If not, Kim?
Councilman Hucks,
Aye.
Councilman Southall,
Aye.
Councilman Green,
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews,
Aye.
Councilman Fye,
I begrudgingly vote aye because I know we're going to lose her from the Parks and Rec Advisory Board.
Mayor Hessel.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Item F on our agenda is a closed session. It is a closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-311A3 of the Code of Virginia as amended to discuss disposition of publicly held real property at 1013 Poquoson Avenue.
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, we go to our closed session. I don't think there'll be any comments, Ms. Kim?
Councilman Southall,
Aye.
Councilman Hucks,
Aye.
Councilman Green,
Aye.
Councilman Fye,
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews,
Aye.
Mayor Hessel.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we'll reconvene from our closed session, and we need to certify that session, please.
Mayor, I move that we certify our closed session and that we talked about only what we convened in the session to talk.
Okay?
Second.
Motion made and seconded that we certify our closed session. Any concerns, comments, questions? If not, Ms. Kim?
Councilwoman Andrews,
Aye.
Councilman Southall,
Aye.
Councilman Finn,
Aye.
Councilman Fine, Councilman Hugs,
Aye.
Councilman Green,
Aye.
Mayor Hessel.
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. City Manager, any comments?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, three things, two of which are related. The first, the one that is not, just people asking me all the time in the community, so I thought I would just brief you once again that the Farm Fresh grand opening is still on track for on or about April the 1st. And I wanted to take a moment and thank a lot of people in no particular order, but beginning with you, Mr. Mayor, but also Dave Callis, Tom Jones, John Anderson, Mark Boson, and the folks at Public Works for our newest micropark. I talked about that the last meeting. We were just beginning it, and then now it's essentially finished. And
nice.
it is there on the main road, roughly in front of Tropical Smithies. And lastly, council members didn't ask, but just for your information, our finance director identified the money for the ambulance that we needed this evening is coming from undesignated capital project funds. The next logical question is, how much money do we have in the undesignated capital projects fund? The answer is approximately $65,000, of which we just spent 60. So unless there's a burning need in another project, we will probably be back to you in the not too distant future with money for something like the next micro park or more picnic tables out at Messick Point or something like that with that small amount of money. And that's all I have.
Okay. Davey?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to wish Vice Mayor and Mrs. Freeman a happy second anniversary. Hope they enjoy their evening. Also like to recognize and thank Randy and all the staff for a very productive, efficient, and well-done work session. Thank you very much. And also, I'd like to thank Mr. Wayne Moore. Your wisdom, experience is invaluable, so I appreciate you sharing that with us.
You just haven't made enough mistakes yet, that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, buddy.
Nothing this
All
evening,
right,
Mr. Mayor.
Keith?
I'd just like to thank everyone that came out last week, or actually it was 2 weeks ago, to the community group meeting. It sure are a lot of interested people on the things going on in Poquoson, and you realize it when you see there about 50 people of various groups and organizations all telling everybody else about what they're doing. It's a really good thing.
I second the comments made by everybody so far, and would like to thank people watching us tonight for their participation.
Ditto.
Okay. Just one comment. Probably a month ago, maybe a little bit longer than a month ago, I spoke with members of council regarding the dredging issue on Lambs Creek. I talked to all of you by phone, and what we were trying to do was to get a first step forward regarding this dredging, which, for the most part, would have been a letter to York County to tell them that, yes, we accepted the first step, but we still have a long way to go. For those who are watching, and I know there are some that are, that letter has been done. It will come to council at our next meeting.
Yes, sir.
And we'll be asking members of the city council to vote on whether or not you want that letter to go forward. I'm not going to sign a letter with that much detail until council approves it. You'll get a chance to see it before our next meeting. So if on the 28th,
Yes,
is
sir.
it?
Yes, sir.
If on the 28th, the letter satisfies everybody and you're still on board, we'll send the letter. It'll be in York County's court. I don't mean court, the courthouse. But it'll be in their court, and then we'll just wait and see what the response is. Then council will decide whether or not we're moving forward from that step on. Okay? So that's all I've got. We've got a motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion made, seconded, we adjourn. Ms. Kim?
Councilman Green,
Aye.
Councilman Hugs,
Aye.
Councilman Fye?
Aye.
Councilman Southall?
Aye.
Councilwoman Andrews?
Aye.
Mayor Hessel?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, the motion carried by a vote of 6-0.
Thank you, ma'am. We are adjourned.